Turn your compassion into action. The world may be harsh sometimes, but you can make a difference. While Margaret was walking down the streets one day, she spotted a beggar. The man looked old, unshaven and ill-dressed. Every passerby looked at him with contempt, not like they had anything against him, but merely because he was a filthy beggar in their eyes. However, when Margaret watched that scene, she was filled with compassion. The beggar was improperly dressed for a weather so cold. He was only wrapped up by an old coat. She kindly asked the man, "Sir, are you all right?" The beggar looked at Margaret, who clearly by her appearance was from a wealthy background. The old beggar thought that she is like every other person, who was mocking him. "Leave me alone," he shouted. But Margaret did not move. Instead, to his surprise, she smiled at him and gently asked if he was hungry. "No, I've just come from dining with the president." "Now go away," the beggar replied with a notable sarcasm. Margaret's smile did not fade. She slid her hands under the beggar's arm and tried to pick him up. "Woman, what do you think you are doing?" The beggar sounded annoyed. "Is there a problem, ma'am?" A policeman shouted, walking towards her and the beggar. "Not at all, officer. I'm just trying to get this man to his feet." "Will you help me?" she said. The policeman looked at her with surprise. "That man is old Jim and has been here for years. What have you got to do with him anyway?" "I'm taking him to a cafeteria to eat something and to get him out of the cold for a while," she answered. "Are you crazy, lady?" The homeless man resisted. "I don't want to go in there." Then he felt strong hands grab his other arm and lift him up. "Let me go, officer. I didn't do anything. It's a good chance to feed yourself, Jim. Don't blow it," the officer advised. After a lot of difficulty, Margaret and the officer managed to drag Jim into the cafeteria. The manager strode towards the table and asked, "What's going on here, officer?" He asked, "Is this man in trouble?" "She brought old Jim in here to be fed," the policeman answered. "Not in my cafeteria. People like him are bad for business," the manager shouted angrily. "Now you know why I didn't want to come in here, woman." Jim said, "Now let me go. I never wanted to be here in the first place." Margaret turned to the cafeteria manager and smiled. "Sir, you are familiar with DBP, right, the banking firm down the street?" "Of course I do. They hold their weekly meetings in one of my banquet rooms," the manager answered impatiently. "And I guess you make a good amount of money through those meetings." Margaret answered. "Why does it concern you, anyway?" the manager asked. "Because I am the CEO of the company," she replied, showing no sign of pride in her statement. "Oh," it was all that the manager managed to say. She looked at the officer. "Would you like to join us in a cup of coffee and a meal, officer?" "No thanks, ma'am," the officer replied. "I'm on duty." "Then, perhaps, a cup of coffee to go." "Yes, ma'am. That would be very nice." "I'll get your coffee for you right away, officer," the manager immediately replied. "You served him right," he said. "Oh, believe me, officer, that was not what I intended. I have a reason behind all this." She stared at Jim intently, and asked, "Jim, do you remember me?" Old Jim examined her face. "Well, you do look familiar." He thoughtfully added, "Do you remember a cold and hungry girl who frequently visited this place when you worked here? She has perhaps grown old, hasn't she?" Margaret.
The officer looked surprised. He couldn't imagine this fine-looking woman as a poor and hungry woman. "I had just graduated and had come to the city looking for a job. Didn't find one for a really long time. I was running out of cash and had been asked to vacate my apartment too. I lived on these streets for days. It was the cold month of January, I still remember. And that's when I found this place and walked in hoping to find something to eat that my little budget could afford." Jim's face suddenly lit up. "Now I remember you. I used to be at the counter. You came up and asked me if you could work for something to eat. I said that it was against company policy." "I know," she said. "Then you offered me the biggest roast beef sandwich, a cup of coffee, and a table for me to sit and enjoy the meal. I saw you put the price of my food in the cash register. So you started your own business?" Old Jim asked. "No, not exactly. That very afternoon I got a job. I worked my way up. Then, I started my own business." She opened her purse and pulled out a business card. "Please pay a visit to the personnel director of my company. I'll go talk to him now. I am sure there is something in my office for which we can use your help. We can even pay you a certain amount of your salary in advance." Fighting back the tears, Jim asked, "How can I ever repay your kindness?" "You don't have to," she answered. "Thank God, he led me to you. Thank you for all your help, officer," she said to him as they both walked out the door. No matter how successful you become, never forget to be grateful to the person who extended a helping hand when times are tough and when you needed it the most. Be compassionate and help others, because one day it will return to you when you least expected it.